What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome to another miniature rescue. This week, we're going to take a look at some really inspiring Chaos Space Marines and try and get them back on their feet. When I first got into this hobby, there were a few things that made a tremendous impact on my overall experience. Picking my first army was definitely near the top of that list. It was my first step into miniature painting, and at least at the time would determine what kinds of models I would build and what kinds of paints that I would need to get that job done. The other half of that pivotal moment was what armies my friends were going to pick, and what I would be seeing on the other side of the table. I remember seeing Space Marines, Necron, and even the super fresh brand new Dark Eldar on the table. But the army that stood out the most, and that I played against the most, were the Chaos Space Marines. The army was just cool. There were units with wildly different looks to them, and they all had that kind of heavy metal edge. Something that continues today, and I'm here for it. The reason I bring all that up is because I just got hit with a massive wave of good memories and nostalgia when I opened up this box. I've been sitting on this box for quite some time, and there are a few reasons for that. The models need quite a bit of help, and there are even some that I'm not sure I can save without robocopping the crap out of them. But even as I'm saying that, it's not actually a terrible idea. I was sent this box of minis a while back by a subscriber named Tim. In it, there are a bunch of models and a nice letter that he sent along giving a little more backstory to this box. Tim and his friends jumped in with both feet and just went for it, taking parts from other kits and just bashing them all together to create some awesome models. So this collection of models that was sent in by Tim is pretty awesome. There's a lot of really cool things going on, a lot of conversions and just kind of crazy stuff thrown together. Like, I can tell that when him and his friends got together, they hobbied and just did whatever they thought was cool, which really is the best thing you want to do with these models. Kind of worrying about being perfect, making these conversions like the neatest thing in the world is certainly not the goal. You want to have as much fun as possible. Why are we doing this if we're not doing that? So taking a look through all the models that I have here, there's some pretty sweet Bretonnians that will take care of it another time. Lots of Chaos Space Marines, lots of Khorne Berserkers, some converted Terminators that we'll get to. I think these are really cool. What I want to focus on this week though are the Khorne Berserkers. A lot of them just kind of need some help. They actually are less converted than the rest of all the models that we have here. So I want to take, I guess, this idea of just like throwing bits and pieces together. I've got a 3D printer that we're checking out this week, so like print some cool stuff out and just see what happens. I also have an idea. With some models somewhere in here. Some of my favorite models that have come out of Age of Sigmar, you know, when I originally got into it, were these Chaos Gorefist guys. They look really cool. They look like Khorne Berserkers. They're not that different. They're fantasy themed, but honestly, they're basically the same things. They just need some bolters. So I think that taking some of the bits, some of the leftovers, if we swap stuff out, we might be able to just get an extra squad of 5 off of these they're pretty bad in terms of quality at this point. When I bought them, they were in a really bad state, and I ended up setting them aside and not using them because they just don't look very good. So I think doing a little bit of conversion work, replacing some of the really bad stuff and going like grim dark makes a lot of sense. We can salvage these and have an extra 5 Khorne Berserkers. So why don't we get these into a bath, start picking everything apart, looking at bits, seeing where we're gonna go. The other thing I've wanted to do for a long time is add a Chaos Space Marine component to this Chaos Demons army. We painted this up on the channel a long time ago, and it's a really cool project. It's got a lot of cool stuff going on. As far as playing this from a fantasy perspective, I already have Blood Warriors, and these models are really cool. I really like them in the fantasy army. I like what they do. They're fun. You don't see them a lot of times. They're probably not the best, but honestly, again, who cares? It's all about having fun. But switching this over to a 40K army, I wouldn't mind some Khorne Berserkers backing up this whole thing. We could do a bunch of cool chaos stuff, just really lean into the Khorne aesthetic. I think it'd be really fun. We already have some banners painted up. We've got iconography all over the place, so just adding more of that and bringing the 40K guns to it would be really cool. Just something I've wanted to do for a while with this particular army, and I think now that we're kind of looking into some of these conversions and helping this other Chaos Space Marine army, we can do something. Okay, so we have a bit of a plan. We need to clean our models, gather some bits, and get ready to build some Khorne Berserkers. But first and foremost, I need to tell you about today's excellent sponsor. Uniformation kindly provided their new GK2 for the printing of bits and minis in this video. 3D printing can be a daunting part of this hobby, and an entirely separate hobby all on its own. Personally, I like to take a hobbyist's approach to 3D printing. I'm mostly looking for things that make the experience easier. So less of a mess, easier to deal with, and mostly out of the way, just kind of in the corner. Now, I've been using the GK2 for a couple of weeks now, and it's been a pretty different experience that I've grown accustomed to with 3D printers. Not that it's completely different, but this printer does feel like it was designed with the user experience in mind. For example, I'm not having to take the top on and off all the time, so it takes up much less space than smaller printers. Just lifts up. The build plate is super quick to take on and off and doesn't require constant leveling like other printers do every single time you turn them on. This one just sits there and attaches. And probably the most impressive feature is that the vat, which pulls out rather than screws on, is heated. As in, there's a built-in heater underneath it that gets your resin to the proper temperature. Now, I'm in a garage. It's finished, but still, the temperature fluctuates a lot, leading to random 3D printing issues. Having the heater built in just makes it so much easier to be more consistent, leading to better overall prints and just a better experience that I'm honestly used to. On top of that, the quality of the prints I'm getting is very good. This is a 10.5-inch 8K screen, so you can fit a ton of stuff, and it prints out really nicely. I have to say that I'm pretty impressed by the GK2. It feels like they thought of a lot of things to just make it easier to find minis and get them in your hand. And that's pretty nice when all you really want to do is sit down and paint up a model. If you'd like to purchase one of these printers or just look into it a little bit more, check out my affiliate link in the description below. Not only will you be getting a nice printer, but it greatly helps out the channel. Thank you for taking a look, and thank you, Uniformation, for sponsoring this video and supporting the miniature hobby. Now let's get back to those sweet, sweet Chaos Minis. The minis get a bath in the sonic cleaner, and after a cycle of about 20 minutes, we're ready to clean them off with a toothbrush. Oh man, this was a particularly satisfying round of cleaning too. Once they get cleaned off, it's time to continue that cleaning by removing the excess mold lines and bits of sprue that might be left on from when they were first put together. Honestly, none of the models were too bad. The older plastic is pretty easy to clean off and the lines come just right off. The only real issue I'm running into is a bit of excess glue on the models. These old multi-part kits had a lot of flat areas for modularity. Those flat areas get glued together. You could put whatever arms you wanted and mix and match parts. It's a great design, but it's really easy to overdo that glue on those flat areas and have the bead pancake out and kind of just get on everything. It's not uncommon, but some parts have gotten a little melted from the plastic glue. Part of the goal will be to hide melted areas with new parts or remove them entirely to replace the damage. We'll kind of just see how it goes with each model. I have gathered an absolute ton of bits with the idea that I will just have a huge pile in front of me to grab from and see what works and what doesn't. This is a pretty fun way to convert models because you can line them up and kind of outfit and kit each model out and see what they'll look like next to each other, just standing there. I also picked up these really neat base toppers. They're kind of a lowish profile pile of stuff that you would see on a sculpted base, but it just gets glued onto an actual base. I guess that's pretty self-explanatory. It's in the name, base topper. Still cool, and it saves a good amount of time and resin compared to printing out full bases like I normally do. Each model here kind of represents its own little challenge. There are little things on each one that could use some work, so I do what I can to just go through each model and try and do some kind of conversion. Remember, the main goal here is to match the aesthetic of the rest of the Chaos Army. Every single model is highly converted. There have been tons of bits added to each one, so I want to keep to that theme and just do something fun with each one of these models. And honestly, I just want to have fun with them. Eventually, I want to come back to the regular Space Marines and see if there's anything I can do to take that conversion to the next level, but that's going to have to be done in another video. So subscribe if you haven't. One thing I am happy to report is the shoulder pads that I printed out are all sized perfectly for these minis and do a great job at covering up any damage that the minis may have incurred from being cut into or from the excess glue. They are doing a lot of the heavy lifting to keep that Khorne look while still being very converted. One of the things I wanted to try, and only as a kind of side experiment, is taking Age of Sigmar Blood Warriors and making them into Khorne Berserkers. There are a few things that make these models very prime candidates for this kind of conversion. They are already Primaris scale, so the size is more akin to the new kit of Khorne Berserkers that came out recently. The heads work for 40k and Age of Sigmar. They have Khorne symbols, and it just kind of works. Even the armor works really well, so not a ton to change. There's not a lot of differences between these two models. I'm going to take this one, change the head, the shoulders, give them some 40k weapons. We'll just kind of see how that goes, see how it looks. My thought is that if we can pick up Blood Warriors for cheaper than Khorne Berserkers, then we could get kind of a 2-for-1 on model types. If we then introduce magnets into at least one arm of the model, then we can swap out a gun for an axe. And that way we can have minis for both systems and they actually look proper for both without too much work. Maybe this is a little too ambitious for kind of this singular video, but we are working with Khorne Berserkers, so here we are.
Look how they massacred my boy.
The aftermath of this conversion session is a bit brutal. There are bits of plastic and resin everywhere, but where there is a mess like this, there is progress. And I'm happy to say that I have at least a 5-man squad to put some paint on and see what happens. Time to employ the great unifier and see what these models look like primed up. I'm pretty excited about how most of these are looking. I think some things work better than other things, but overall I'm happy with the work that we've done here. These will be fun to paint up and be perfect Khorne Berserkers on the table. You can pretty much guarantee that nobody will have ones like this, just like this army is calling for. So far so good. Let's move on over to the painting table and get some color going on these to get an even better look. I'll start by using a red and orange 3-color triad from the Army Painter Air range. Starting with that darker red, I lay that down over the entire model, making sure to get good coverage on top while leaving the undersides of everything a little closer to black. Then with the pure red, I can go almost completely from the top down and get a nice gradient. Finally, finish off small areas with a little bit of orange. Next up will be some bronze on all of the trim. I decided to go a little darker gold for 2 reasons. The first is that there will be room to highlight up if we want to go brighter, and that's never a bad place to be. The second is that there's still a little bit of damage on the models, and we need a reliable way to cover that up. There's no better way to justify the damage to a rescued model more than story. So if need be, we can weather these minis down, and the damage to the plastic looks a lot more intentional when you do that. A more copper or bronze color trim means we can bring in weathering tech to those pieces and have it all make sense within the context of our model's story. So it's a good idea to set that up early on, and it's just a color choice too, but it does a lot. Some silver goes down to fill in the rest of the metal parts. Brown for the leather gloves, which I've always preferred over the black for Khorne models. And now we're ready to wash this model down. A black wash will not only darken down and unify our colors, giving us more of a weathered appearance, hiding more of those problem areas as I mentioned before, and giving us a nice little black line next to the metallic details. I am more after washing the metallics to get that definition more than the armor, but a smooth coat over the top of everything certainly doesn't hurt. You just have to be a little extra careful to get every piece before any of it dries and wick any of the excess away from flat areas. That way you get a clean and smooth wash over everything, and it acts as a black liner and a filter for the model. After that dries, I want to add a little bit of extra color to the model. Something about a good teal verdigris always seems to do well for me. I like the way it looks on pretty much everything, especially against the red and orange armor. The contrast is just good, and again, it works to hide any other issues that we may have with the model. However, in a lot of cases, I just want it there because it looks cool. The last thing I want to do on any of these models is to brighten up some of that detail. Going over the metallics again if needed just to help them stick out, and any of the red armor that needs a bit of punch in color can get a thin coat of red and orange to help them look their best. This is also a great time to add volumetric highlights to any of the armor. A few select highlights and the armor just looks that much nicer. Edge highlighting if needed, some glazing, weathering, and these minis are pretty much ready for a game. I really like getting boxes like this in the mail. This is a collection of models that just really tell a story. One of creativity and passion, and above all, fun and friendship. These guys played games together and created this incredibly unique Chaos Space Marine army. It's not something you see every day, and now we've taken the first step into getting this army back on the tabletop. Khorne Berserkers are one of my absolute favorite units. Great older kits and have more than a little bit of character to them, especially for being Space Marines. And I'm glad that we got to do some work to make them even cooler than they were before. So a huge thank you to Tim for sending this box, and I hope that this army is continuing the way that you had hoped. Thank you again for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this video with your hobby friends, and of course, subscribing for more miniature rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. And we can't forget these epic converted Khorne Berserkers. Thanks again.